The conversation of your life, local, relevant, digital, and always on.
America will hear my 2 cents.
Elected to serve iHub radio listeners across the desert cities. He calls it as he sees it.
Quick question.
Now, here's Russ Betts.
Someone answer him now!
Well, that came up quick. Welcome to the Russ Betts Show. I'm Russ Betts. We're coming to you from beautiful downtown Palm Springs and the beautiful studios here at iHub Radio. Happy Sunday to you, and well, let's get right into this one. I got a little bit of a tease for you here. Coming up in the second half of our show today is going to be some information about a local water district, and it was a story that broke first on Facebook, and it hasn't really hit the media yet, but I'm pretty certain it will. It's an interesting story, so we'll cover that one at the second half of the show. I got some other things I want to get to first. The first thing is I'm going to cover a little business from last week. I didn't get to this in last week's show, and I heard a couple of talk show hosts, they're contemplating, discussing what's going on with these tariffs that are going on between the U.S. and China and the trade war there. Now, I'm certainly not an expert in tariffs. It's a very complicated subject. There's a lot going on with that one. But I have about 10, 15 years of my career dealing with tariffs, specifically between China and the U.S., and I spent 8 years living in China, dealing with the Chinese. And so there's a few things that come out on this one that I got a little different perspective than what I heard on the local talk show. But I'm going to start with a article in the Wall Street Journal, just to frame this for us. And it says, broad support for Trump's China fight faces test as tariffs escalate. And basically what it's saying is both parties have largely given President Trump leeway on Beijing, but steeper levies on imports passed on U.S. companies and consumers might change that. Let's just put that in simple terms. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump is getting a pass from both Democrats and Republicans as he gears up this trade fight, but that's going to maybe change once people start getting impacted by higher prices. That's just a week old, so I've already heard some noise about people saying, oh, what are you doing to these poor consumers, and isn't this terrible how these prices are going up? Anyhow, this thing goes on, the Wall Street Journal goes on, it says, President Trump has enjoyed this rare bipartisan cheering for his brass-knuckle trade fight with China, but that support will now be tested as consumers carry the burden of higher tariffs on Chinese goods. And of course, the caveat to that is only if they buy those Chinese goods. They've got other places they can go. But the big central question up until now has been, haven't American workers felt the burden of low tariffs, unfair tariffs on Chinese goods? That's been going on for years. And again, I'm listening to one of my favorite talk show hosts, and they're talking about this situation with consumers, but I'm going, when are we going to level the playing field for the American worker? Anyhow, so I'm not sure I'm buying the Wall Street Journal saying Trump's going to get a pass. I don't think he gets a pass on anything. We got jobs here at home, and that's good for everyone. And maybe prices do go up a bit, but maybe we also start to get our middle class back. Haven't we had enough yet of the race to the bottom? Maybe remember that race to the bottom where it got to the point, it was so bad that Walmart is struggling against dollar stores. Walmart's bringing in all this cheap imports from China. All the manufacturing jobs are shifting over to China. American workers are losing their jobs. I want to focus on this conversation that I heard on this radio show. And the gist of it was the U.S. has more to lose than does China. They were speculating that the U.S. has to lose in this event. So I'm going to look at what the stats say. And the stats give a little different story than the U.S. is just automatically going to lose. China shipped 19% of its exports to only one country in the world. There's one country that represents 20% of China's export business, and that's the United States. Now, far more goods are coming from China than we ship to China. So I don't think China's sitting over there maybe necessarily thinking that they haven't got anything to lose. And of course, they're taking a get tough stance, and certainly so is Trump. $479 billion of trade exported from China to the U.S. That's 19.2%, just call it 20% to round it off. Their next closest trading partner was Hong Kong, which is basically, domestic sales anyhow, but that's 12%. Japan at 6%. Then you get down to Vietnam, Germany are at 3%. United Kingdom's at 2%. So, I mean, even these other countries around the world, Australia, well, they don't have many people there, but they're at 1.9%. So, by far, you take 20% out of the equation, and I don't think China is going to necessarily think they don't have anything to lose. So let's talk tactics. And this is where, once you've dealt with the Chinese in negotiations, this is where this comes to play. When you're over there doing business with the Chinese, here's what you learn very quickly. When you're negotiating with the Chinese, you always go further in negotiations with the Chinese than the Chinese think you are willing to go. So they're sitting there calculating your position, and when you present your position, you always go much further than what they think you're willing to go. That's just a tactic. It's just they're tough bargainers. And I'm just going to share a little story here with you. This is a first-hand account. It illustrates exactly what happens when you're dealing with the Chinese. This friend of mine, he was there on a contract to install some equipment to manufacture a new product in China. And their contract specified that they got 30% down before they got started. They decided, we got all this work, we're coming there, we want 30% down to help cover our costs. Then at another stage of installation, they got another 30%. And then once everything was up and running, they got the other 30%. The final payment would be 10%. Once everything's up and running, they're producing product and all the equipment's working, well, then the Chinese were to pay the final 10% to this company. Well, the Chinese said, hey, you dopes. Everything's up and running. Why do I have to pay you the final 10% for? Well, that's what you agreed to. Well, you might have agreed to it, but guess what? What are you going to do about it? So I'm sitting at the pub, my friend, and he says, well, we're going home tomorrow, but we just got back from the factory, and we've got all this proprietary software that makes this equipment run. So we just went and removed all this software from the equipment. And so when they go in the morning, they're going to try and fire everything up, and nothing's going to work. And we've already got our tickets. We're getting on the plane. We're leaving for Beijing we're leaving for the airport first thing in the morning and going back home. And so you're not going to wait around? He says, no, they're good. We're going to go back to our home country and we'll just wait. So sure enough, they take off, and he comes back a few weeks later and says, well, they paid. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, we said that we're not coming back to you. Send us the money. And they wanted us to come back, get everything running first, and then they'd promised to pay. We said, no, we already went through that once. You send us the money, you wired here, full payment, give us all, and then we'll come back. And of course, the Chinese are thinking, well, if we pay you, you won't, we have no way of making sure you come back and get this equipment running. And they said, well, you know what? If you don't pay us, we can guarantee you won't get this equipment running. All right, there is my rant for the morning on tariffs that I wanted to get to last week but didn't have time. And now I got to get to something that's really important. We got to hear from some of our advertisers here because I'm over time. This is Russ Betts on iHub Radio.
Make a big change to your bathroom. Options? Yeah, you've got them. With a new collection of vanities that are on trend and savings to keep you on budget. The Home Depot's putting the power of change right in your hands. See? Change is a very good thing. Start making changes now with vanities starting at just $129 only from the Home Depot. More saving, more doing.
It's 2019. How are those resolutions coming along? If you made a promise to yourself that the world would see a new you, someone with renewed confidence, someone that's ready to take on new challenges, there's no better way to get the boost you need than paying a visit to Maina's Hair Salon in DHS. Remember, when you have the right haircut, bad hair days are few and far between. Maina has been helping folks look their very best for more than 15 years. Updos, fades, shampoo set, and great men's haircuts. Full color and touch-ups, too. Maina Mena's Hair Salon is comfortable, air-conditioned, and they have free Wi-Fi. Open every day of the week just south of Pearson Boulevard on Palm Drive. Mena is located in the heart of Desert Hot Springs. If you're looking for reasonable prices and great styling, end the bad hair days with a visit to Mena. Call 760-288-7398. That's 760-288-7398 for an appointment. And walk-ins are always welcome too.
Read about it tomorrow. See it tonight. Hear it all day today. If it's happening in the Coachella Valley, it's front and center now on iHub Radio.
And there it is.
Now, here's Russ Betts.
Okay, in case you think this tariff thing is just only a Republican thing, it's not. It runs both ways. We were talking about that for the better part of the last segment, and I just had a little additional note here just to let you know that this race to the bottom has been fueled by both Democrats and Republicans. I remember back in the 90s, I had a friend who his job was to help companies locate in China. And he would be the liaison there, and people would come in from the U.S. and say, hi, we'd really like to start manufacturing here in China. Everybody else is doing it. We're closing down our jobs here, and we want to put them in China. And so that was his job. And I remember one day I'm sitting there, this is back in the 90s, this was a little while ago, but I'm sitting at the pub, I'm at the Long Bar in downtown Shanghai, and he says, wow, I really wish I had the contacts this other guy has. He competed with other people. A lot of people wanted to be these liaisons to help companies move their businesses to China. They move their manufacturing to China. And I said, well, why is that? And he says, well, this guy's got a U.S. senator that he's working with. I mean, can you imagine the gravitas that brings? Well, that senator was Senator John Kerry. And he was working with a company called Boston Capital and Technology, who was working to bring high-tech jobs from the U.S. and to relocate them in China. So last I looked, John Kerry was a Democrat. There you go. So the race to the bottom is fueled by people who are making money off of racing us to the bottom, and the price is that all of us, we get our lower prices, but we also got our neighbors out of work, and what good does that do any of us? Okay, so I promised I wasn't going to go on too long, because I'm going to get on to a much more local story. Immigration. I talked to the mayor of Blythe, about a week ago, and I just wanted to get his take on what's going on with the situation down there. If you hadn't heard, the Border Patrol has been rolling into the bus station and dropping off new immigrants. The people coming across, some people want to call them asylum seekers. We're just going to call them migrants. That'll make it easy. The new migrants, they're overrun at the Border Patrol offices, so they've been dropping them off at bus stations in Blythe. And Blythe was getting a little overrun by it. They've been getting 20 to 30 a day, and they're actually doing a count on it. They're getting 20 to 30 a day, and they're on, I think, day 51 now of 20 or 30 a day dropped off at the bus station. Well, they had a local charity digging in to help take care of them, to, feed and clothe and get them showers and get them cleaned up and get them what they needed to as they transition from Blythe. And the mayor said down there was a little bit of panic until they figured out that, well, they're just a transition point in Blythe, and so they come, they go, and they haven't been overrun except for they were running up huge costs, and the state of California just came through with $500,000 to help alleviate that situation. So fast forward a couple of weeks, and I'm at the Public Safety Committee meeting at the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, and as we do there, each person who's on the public safety official goes around and talks about what's on their mind. And when it got to Palm Springs Police Chief Brian Reyes to say, well, what's on your mind? And he says, well, we just got notified by the Border Patrol that cities around the Coachella Valley can now start expecting to have the same type of situation as Blythe is going through, with new migrants being dropped off, bused to different locations, Palm Springs, Palm Desert, wherever you name it. Now, KSQ did a story. It was a good story talking about a church that's down there in Coachella that's been dealing with this for a while, and everybody will say, oh, well, that's old news, and no, it's not. It's new news. They've been going into that church in Coachella, dealing with it and helping and doing, good work there to make everything happen down there. But the new news is that church is getting overrun. The numbers that are coming across are 4,500 a day as an average. And they're just overrun down there at the border, so they've got to start sending them somewhere. So, obviously, by bus is the first option. And then taking this story national, and it actually gets a bit comical, now they're starting to send them by plane. And if you remember back, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months ago, the city of Concord, California, was worried that the U.S. was going to start, immigration was going to start dropping off immigrants into a naval base, that they were going to start using that as an immigration center. And, they had panicked. That went through the streets of Concord. They had a city hall that was packed with residents that said, not here, we don't want them. We don't want any immigrants in Concord. And that rumor had spread, and city council members and congressmen representing the area chastised President Trump for a plan to move migrants to Concord. Well, it turns out there wasn't a plan. It was just a rumor. There were no plans to move immigrants to Concord. Now, there may be now, because they're certainly looking everywhere to put people, but back then there wasn't. And they actually were moving them to 2 locations in Texas. Anybody see the movie The Russians Are Coming? A Russian sub runs aground in low tide, and a very nice group of Russian sailors has to come ashore for what it needs to get its sub free. The town goes into hysterical panic. The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. That was the scene in Concord, California, when they were talking about the immigrants are coming. Well, there's more. Seattle doesn't want them. Palm Beach, Florida doesn't want them. I'm going to give you this list of these reactions. It's totally hysterical. And then we're going to get to this story on Mission Springs Water District. That's going to be very entertaining. You want to stick around for that. But right now, this is Russ Betts on iHub Radio here in beautiful downtown Palm Springs. It's Sunday. It's the Russ Betts Show on iHub Radio. And we're back with more.
The conversation of your life, local, relevant, digital, and always on.
America will hear my 2 cents.
Elected to serve iHub Radio listeners across the desert cities. He calls it as he sees it.
Quick question.
Now, here's Russ Betts.
Someone answer him now!
Okay, before the break, we were talking a little bit about the immigration and that it's starting to hit locally. The Border Patrol has contacted cities in the Coachella Valley to let them know that, hey, there'll be more spots that are getting dropped off because Blythe can't handle them all. In fact, they're getting that notices going out all over the country that instead of buses going to the border states, they're now going to start sending them off to all sorts of other places. Well, Seattle got notified that they're going to send them. In fact, they have planes coming in, but apparently Seattle doesn't want them. Officials in Seattle have come up with a really unique way to stop the immigrant flights. Their idea is, they're not going to allow any ICE planes, Border Patrol planes that land on Boeing Field to be serviced. And so they're diverting the planes 150 miles away to Yakima Airport at a necessity. We're, sorry, you can land here, but you're not going to get fuel, so you won't be able to take off. You're not getting anything you need. We're not supporting these planes. So they're going off to Yakima Airport. So now you go to, there was a press conference that was done by officials in Palm Beach County, Florida, and Broward County, Florida. And I guess they were notified that they're going to be getting 1,000 a week of new immigrants, and they're complaining. And they issued a news release that says Broward County officials have been informed that the federal government will be sending hundreds of migrants to Broward County to alleviate the highly publicized problems at the U.S.-Mexico border. Now, just to recap, those problems are 4,500 people a day swamping the facilities of the Border Patrol, and they're not set up to handle that. That's a lot of people. How many people flood out of the Staples Arena or the Fabulous Forum after a concert? Do they call it the Fabulous Forum anymore? I don't know. Anyhow, but you can imagine all the people coming out of a concert, and they're all equipped to be handled inside that facility. But what happens when they come streaming out into the neighborhoods and they got to go into another facility? Is there anything down there at the border that's got the capacity to handle 4,500 a day? I'm imagining the conversation going, hey, we got 4,500 people here we got to deal with. What are we going to do with them? I don't know. We're stuffed. Well, we better figure out something because we got another 4,500 coming tomorrow and the day after that. It's 4,500 a day that are coming across the border. So the plan is, well, you know what? We've got to get them somewhere, so put them on planes. We've got these, I guess they have planes that are part of the fleet of the Immigration and Naturalization Service of the Border Patrol, so they're putting them on those planes, they're flying them, and as a courtesy, they're calling up places like Broward County and Palm Beach County and telling them, hi, let you know we've got this going on. And, you know, those officials are saying, hey, you know, this isn't going to work. You know, how are we supposed to take care of all these people? We don't have the capacity. Well, we're going to feed them. Where are they going to go? And they're saying that in Broward County and Palm Beach, they're saying, how about you send some federal money? I'm not sure really that's what they want, because, I mean, the list of people that don't want immigrants, it's great when you want somebody else to take them, and that's exactly what they said in Palm Beach County and Broward County is, hey, this is a border state problem. This isn't our problem. We're not a border state. We don't want them. They should handle them. So, all right. So I'm going to get to this Mission Springs Water District story, and I'm just going to lay this out for you in the sequence that had happened, and you can kind of follow along with me, and we'll go from there. It started out with somebody complaining that they had gotten an extraordinarily high water bill. Normally their water bill is just, say, for example's sake, $30 a month or $50 a month. Pick the number you want. And each and every month their bill is $50, $50, $50, $50, and then comes along a bill for $400. And they call out the leak detection service. They look at all the toilets. They check everywhere they look. They can't find any explanation as to why their bill suddenly spiked to $400 when it's averaged $50 for every month that they can remember. And the next month, without having made any repairs, doing nothing, the bill goes right back down. And so it's an unexplained spike. And if you talk to the water district, they'll tell you, well, sorry, our meters don't lie. There must be something going on at that property. Except that, you know, people start talking and sharing, they're told, well, you're the only one, and they find out that, no, you're not the only one. It's a whole bunch of people having this problem. So now you got this happening again, if somebody talking about it over the weekend. But there's, they came out with an explanation that I thought was really odd, is they said that some of the houses in the district are on an estimated bill. Now, I've heard of estimated bills before. When I was back in Pennsylvania, when they wanted the utilities wanted to save money, instead of sending the meter readers out once a month, they sent them out every other month. And the month that you would get, one bill would be actual meter read, and the next bill would be an estimated meter read. And at first, I thought that's what we were talking about. So I got curious, and I went out and looked at my meter, and what it's got is this type of meter. They take this module and they put it over the top of the mechanical meter, and it sends an electronic signal out to the truck, and the truck they can read the meter electronically instead of the guy actually having to lift off the lid, write down numbers, and the old way, labor-intensive way. So now you send a truck down the neighborhood. So I saw that the LED thing was dark, it wasn't working, and I'd heard that it was the batteries were failing in these units. So I called up out of curiosity. I said, hey, do I have in my meter an estimated meter, or is it an actual meter reading? He says, "Oh, well, I'm sorry to tell you that, unfortunately, you're on an estimated meter, and so, we just take a 12-month average, and then that's what we use to determine your water usage." A 12-month average? This is an estimated 1 month and actual the next. He says, "Oh, no, the meters aren't working." So I started looking at this and go, how many meters in the district aren't working? So I go pop a few other little boxes of my neighbors, or what are you doing? I just look at your meter. It's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm not touching anything. And so it turns out an entire neighborhood's meters are not working. And I guess it's like quite a few from what I'm now finding out. And I'm sitting there asking myself, how does a water company have, I'm going to say, hundreds of meters that aren't working, and all they're doing is giving an estimate? What if somebody goes on vacation and doesn't use any water? Maybe in May or April of last year, they were home and using water, but they decided for whatever reason they weren't going to be home, so they're using no water. But their water bill, they're being charged for water based on prior usage from an entire year. Somebody just sitting there saying, well, how do we bill this? Well, just bill them what their usage was last year. They've got no actual meter reading. Well, then the other thing comes along is, what if somebody's just installed a swimming pool? They get to fill that pool for free, and everybody who's contemplated buying a pool and filling it up has said, man, this is going to cost me to fill this thing up. So and they're on tiered rates, so you can't possibly charge somebody in the first tier, second tier, third tier, whatever the water usage is, if you're doing an estimated, because how do you really know they went into that second tier? That's when it starts to get expensive on the second and third tier. So are they just billing on the first tier? So I don't have any answers, but I got a lot of questions. And I'm going to meet with the water district officials to find out exactly what's going on with this. But it seems like a really simple solution to me. If you've got meters that aren't working for one reason or another, and this has been going on for a year or two, when do you plan to replace the meters? I was off at an event over the weekend, and I happened to run into some people that serve on water districts. And it wasn't a water district meeting, it was just a private social event, but I knew they were on water districts, and I explained the situation to them, and they were a bit amused by it, saying things like, well, that's highly unusual, and well, how do they manage that one? And one of them said, well, somebody's got a problem. I guess if you got hundreds of meters that aren't reading at all, and you're just using past years to guess, really what you're doing, guessing what somebody's bill is. So now, this is unrelated, I think, to the situation of the meter spiking, but it just goes to show you that it was total intractability on that meter spiking issue. I actually called down to the Coachella Valley Water District and asked them how they handle it, and they said, we've heard of that, and we have actually had it in our system, and nobody can explain what it is. And we're pretty certain that our meters are working, but we believe the customer that, they're having a problem. So their solution is they just knock that bill way, way down when that happens, and they give a forgiveness, but only once every 5 years. And they said it seemed like a long time, it'd have to go 5 years to get forgiveness on something like that. She said, but that's basically, once we give forgiveness, we don't hear from anybody again. It's just a total anomaly on how this happens, what happened. And she didn't know if somebody left a garden hose going, but the amount of water that you would have to run through a garden hose, I think it's like 2 gallons a minute. You're going to flood your yard on that one. So anyhow, there's the story. I don't know what's going to come of it. I just imagining that, half the meters in town, a third of the meters, 100 meters aren't working. And then what happens, and are they charging actual water usage rate, or are they giving people a discount, erring on the side of low because they don't really know what the bill's going to be? And then does that mean everybody else that has a meter, because the way the water district's bill is total cost divided by usage equals price, so does everybody that has a meter now, are they paying more? And then this is a water district now that's had 5 increases in a row. Each year they've had an increase, and it's been substantial. Huge amounts of increase. I don't know what the reserves are. That's my next question, is maybe they're so broke they can't afford meters. I don't think that's the case. Last I heard, they had a significant amount of reserves. I know KSQ covered an issue of water spiking. Somebody ran into that issue, and that's I think what prompted the person to speak up on Facebook. They'd seen that story by KSQ and said, hey, same thing just happened to me. It's buried in a big, long response by the water district that says we're estimating bills, and you can see on your bill where it says this is an estimated bill. And so anyhow, all right, that's it. That's the big news out of Mission Springs Water District that I promised to get you. I'll keep you posted on that one when I find out more. But right now, that's all we got. And this is Russ Betts on iHub Radio, and we'll be back with more.
Live from the Palm Springs iHub, he calls it as he sees it. The Russ Betts Show. Call 760-544-TALK. Now, here's Russ Betts.
Okay, we're back. Just delivered you some big earth-shaking news regarding a local water district. We'll keep an eye on that one, but there's never enough time in a 1-hour show to get to everything you wanted to cover. I was, like I said, I've been listening to some other radio shows, and President Trump's poll numbers were a big piece of a conversation, and talking about how dismal they are. And so I went and looked. They got a website out there, Real Clear Politics, that will show you his presidential approval numbers. And they got the Rasmussen reports, which is the one everybody says is most favorable on what his approval rating is. They got 47% disapprove and 50% approve. But that's Rasmussen reports. They got the Hill-Harris poll, Reuters, Economist, YouGov poll, Politico, Morning Consult poll, Quinnipiac. Well, they go on and on. CNN, Gallup, they all do their polls. And so I go, okay, well, I always hear this. Every president, once you've been around a while, you kind of, you remember presidents. They always say, oh, his poll numbers are terrible. He's doing horrible. And they always point to this 43 or 47% approval rating. And I think, well, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. So I went and looked, and they did a comparison between what Obama's numbers were at this time and what Trump's numbers were this time, and they give you a tracking poll. And what counts is, if you want to, it doesn't matter which poll skews higher or lower. You can follow two things. One, the trend. The trend will be the same as long as you're using the same methodology. The trend will be the same, so you can follow. Generally every president starts out with high approvals after the election, and then it drops once they start having to deal with the job. And I'm looking at this graph here, and it's like almost the lines are almost on top of each other, tracking exactly the same, Obama's numbers and Trump's numbers. And I can remember the Republicans talking when they're talking about Obama, his polling's at 43%, at 47%. And as I went and looked at it, that's all they're ever at. So what's key? When you hear somebody talking about the polls, don't just say, oh, well, that's interesting. Do a little bit more digging, or have them give you the detail. And the detail you want to ask for is, okay, well, how does that compare to other presidents? And it's a tough job, and they're all going to get flack from the opposition party, and, that's just the way it goes. So I wanted to get into that story. Actually, probably just did cover it a little bit, but the main part of the story was I was looking at this article in Politico, and it says, Democrats hunt for an economic argument to counter Trump. And the conversation was, well, what do you do when the economy's really good? I mean, if you talk to James Carville, who was President Clinton's campaign advisor and advising him on his re-election bid, hey, it's the economy, stupid. And this economy is roaring along. And I know there's always some people that are left out of a good economy and struggling. And, you can sit there and say the jobs pay compared to what other people are making. We got a huge disparity of wealth in this country, which is a very serious problem. But things are way, way better than they were. I mean, you talk to guys who were superintendents on construction jobs that got laid off during the Great Recession, and now they're back to work. Said, hey, one guy, I was just talking to a friend of mine, he says, I'm actually going out and buying a car. I never thought I'd be eligible to buy a car again. And they kind of forgave what went on before because they recognized there's a lot of people there. And I'm not even paying that high an interest rate. I got a good job. They checked it out, and I'm getting a new car. I never thought that would happen. Now, well, give heaps of credit to President Obama for saving. I mean, we went into a great recession, but that guy saved us from a Great Depression. Remember the bag of you-know-what he was handed by Bush when Bush handed over 3 months before everything over? You know, Bush was making some decisions that no Republican would make, because I'm sure they were telling him, hey, Mr. President, you might not like this, but if you don't do this, this next guy that's coming along is going to have an impossible situation. It's almost impossible now. You've left a huge mess for this guy. So anyhow, credit to President Obama. And, if Trump wants to take some credit for not tanking the economy, all right, let that one go out there. The bottom line is everybody who doesn't like the president of the opposition party is going to start screaming how horrible they are and that everything's terrible. And, when it's terrible, it's terrible. But when it comes to poll tracking numbers, the point of this one is go look it up. And when it comes to this larger story, which I'm not getting into, what are the Democrats going to do? What's their message? What's that party going to do to counter a good economy? People vote their pocketbooks is the old adage. Maybe that's not true anymore. I don't know. All right, we're going to get into the pocketbooks of California state. And there's a pot shock. They're calling it a pot shock. Cannabis revenue falls even further below expectations. Now, you probably heard that California was expecting this huge boom from marijuana sales, and all the cities were counting on it. I know in our city, Desert Hot Springs, they had MSNBC come out and talk to somebody and said, oh, there's going to be a $50 million influx of cash to the city coffers. City budget right now is $18 million, so $50 million was, wow, great, start rubbing your hands together. We got a lot of money coming. That hasn't happened yet. It's about $2 million that's come in. And the state's just way, way down on their numbers. They're collecting $223 million less in cannabis tax revenue. Now, Governor Newsom is blaming local governments, saying that they've been resistant to commercial pot in their counties. There's some cities that don't want it. I see them when I make my rounds as a council member regionally in regional boards and commissions. I talk to those councilors, no, we don't want it. And, well, they know we've gone into it in Desert Hot Springs in a big way. Hey, it's been a great boom to our economy. But I'm not quite getting this resistance to commercial pot in their communities thing. I mean, supply and demand isn't dependent on every geographic corner of the state having marijuana available, and that's the reason for the problem. The problem is there's still a black market out there that is selling heaps of marijuana to people, and then there's a regulated market. And the regulated market isn't doing as well as it could because the taxes are so high. The taxes are through the roof. They're paying up to 37% tax. And that's a 37% imbalance. On top of that, all the regulations that they have to put up with. So, and then I'm looking at this other story here where somebody wants to grow hemp, and you got the states or the counties saying, well, I don't know, we're not sure we want hemp farming in Merced County, saying, well, wait a minute, put the brakes on hemp, and that's a great industry. Places like China just have fields and fields and fields. When you take a ride on the train, you see these fields of hemp. Well, they're making rope and all kinds of product out of hemp. Anyhow, then California, to solve this, wants to force every city that didn't want marijuana to have pot shops. That's Assembly Bill 1356. We don't have time to get into nearly enough of the stuff we want to get into here on the Russ Bet Show, but we're back next Sunday. Anita Rufus, the lovable liberal, coming up next. We're done for the day.